Tunde Balogun is the lead pastor of the Kingsborough Church. He is the visionary and the chief executive of the Kingsborough Centre, the organisation overseeing the Hillingdon Food Bank and the Coat of Many Colours Nursery. He is married to Oluwatoyin, who is the director of operations at the Kingsborough Centre and the area manager for the CMC nurseries. Please make welcome the conveners of our annual academic lecture, Apostle Tunde and Toyin Balogun.
You're welcome once again to this year, the second academic lecture here at the Kingsborough Church, here in Oxbridge, and we hope that you will have a good time learning together as we all collaborate and engage on this topic of social care. Now, for those of you who might like to have a copy of what we did last year, we have a binded copy of the lecture delivered. So if you haven't had a copy, you might just be able to get one downstairs on the way out so they can make yourself benefit. After we're going to do that for this as well at the end of today. But I will just, as we progress this morning, hand over to Toyin, who is just going to finish up with the housekeeping and all the rest of what we're going to be doing for this morning.
Okay, so as we can see, we have a lineup of speakers this morning who are going to enlighten us more about the social care industry. And I really want us to pay attention, because today you might just be learning something new. You may be in that career already, but there's always a room and opportunity to learn so much more. Really want to appreciate all our guests here. We are going to hear so much about them as we call them one at a time to come and deliver their speeches. We would be able to tell you more about them, but we really want to first appreciate all of them. If you all put your hands together for every single one of our special guests this morning, we really want to appreciate you. We thank you so much for finding that time in your busy life to come and be with us this morning, and we really do not take it for granted. So I think the first person that will be coming here today is the Deputy Mayor. Yeah.
So why are we here, you might be wondering? Why do we come here on a Saturday morning like this to come and talk about social care? My answer to that is, I'll tell you a story, a brief story. A gentleman went to a supermarket on a Saturday morning like this to go and do shopping. And he finished up his shopping. And as he was getting out of the supermarket, he realized that he didn't have the key of the car. So he dashed back in panic to where he had picked up a few oranges, onions, cucumbers, and so on, to go and see whether the keys had fallen off into the basket or into the shopping racks. He got there, he was searching frantically, and as he couldn't find it, he then remembered, I think I might have left the key at the ignition while I dashed in to come and do the shopping. So in panic, he ran through the entrance of the door to the supermarket to go and check. And at the entrance, he overlooked and saw where he parked the car, and the car was gone. Oh, they've stolen the car. And it was a wife's car. And he said to the attendant at the supermarket, can you please call the police, because there's something gone wrong here. My car has been stolen in the car park. I parked the car there. And they were trying to help him, and they called the police. He was getting hysterical already. And they called the police, and they were asking him on the phone, so what does the car look like? What is the car? And he gave the description of the car. When did you get into the supermarket? He gave them the time frame. And they said, okay, don't worry. We will send some of our surveillance to go and look around, because the car won't have gone far if it's just been taken in the last 30 minutes. And they were doing that. And he said, I think the greatest problem this morning for me is how to tell my wife. and said, can I just use the phone to call my wife and tell her? Then he called and said, darling, I'm so sorry to let you know that I left the key on the ignition when I got into the supermarket and the car has been stolen. And the wife yelled at the other end of the phone, say, don't be silly. I just dropped you at the supermarket to do your shopping. And I was going to come and pick you up. But I can't do that now. He said, why? Because the police have just caught me on the road because you gave them the description that I've got the car stolen. And I can't even come. I'm trying to convince them that I didn't steal the car. What has happened here is that this man was getting old, but he didn't know. He didn't realize that age was not just catching up with him, but he's beginning to lose memories as well. That is the situation of a lot of our aging people in our community today. The good news is that the United Kingdom is aging very well, gracefully, we would say. And that is what we pray for. We want to live long. But we want to live long, also gracefully, with less problems. Today, I'm hoping that you'll be challenged. I'm hoping that you'll hear something that you haven't heard before. I'm hoping that you will sit back and you will look at the fact that we have witnessed irreversible changes that has resulted in transformational paradigm shift in the marketplace since COVID. The church happened to be one of the places that has the greatest deposit of resources in the community. But the church happens to be one of those as well that always get to the party late. That is, if we go to the party at all. Because sometimes we don't even show up at the party. Because see, this morning, we're talking about social care. All of the seats were registered for, but they are still coming. You agree with me? But they are only going to come because it is going to be when they think is necessary. And that is the picture of the church. Here at Kingsborough, we believe in the desire to change that narrative so that we can redeem time and stop the wastage of the huge resources that we have amongst us, that if properly annexed and deployed, it will have brought a big change of transformation and resourcefulness into the community and into the nation. Today, I want to charge you to let us get on with the discussion, let the discussion start, and let the change happen to all of us. Amen? On that note, I'm going to invite for us our keynote speaker, and I know the media has a brief intro that will come. But before that, it is my greatest honor to have our special guest of honor here with us today. He's very, very involved with all that is happening in this borough. Please join me as we welcome Councillor Philip Cawthon. He's the Deputy Mayor of Hillingdon. Please make him welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for that welcome and introduction. And on behalf of the Mayor of the London Borough of Hillingdon, it is my great pleasure to be here this morning for the opening of the annual academic lecture of the Kingsborough Centre, an organisation about which I know relatively little, having been a councillor for 30 years in the borough, although my ward is Ruislip, so I suppose that might just let me off a little bit. But even so, I've been learning quickly in the half an hour or so that I've been here already today. And one of the things about being Deputy Mayor, of course, is you can't invite me to anything. It's impossible to invite me to an event at all. And the reason for that is that the Mayor takes precedence over me, and it's the Mayor that gets invited to events ahead of me. If the Mayor can't make it, it means that I get asked, am I free? Have I got a slot in my diary? And on that basis, I've attended a number of events, a really wide range of activities and events this year. That's been an enormous pleasure and privilege. And I must say today is a particularly happy coincidence, because adult social care is something in which I take an informed interest. I'm not a professional in the field of adult services, and I certainly bow to the wisdom of the eminent people here today, not least Keith, who we'll be hearing from next. But it's something that I was lead member of for Hillingdon for a number of years. I used to lead on adult social care and health as cabinet member between about 2006 and 2019. And this good lady, whose name has momentarily escaped me, forgive me, certainly I remember from those days. So I take an informed interest, so much so that I brought my notebook with me today to make a few notes from what I hear. I don't do that at many events, but I certainly am today. My only regret, I'm afraid, is I can only be here for the first hour, which I've already said, but I'm going to be making notes, and I know that I'm going to be sent a link of what transpires today, so I'll look forward to seeing that. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Professor Keith, if I may. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. I think that's correct. Look forward to hearing from him, but I hope that you'll get a lot out of today. I know I certainly will in the time I'm here. So thank you very much indeed once again, and let's enjoy the day. Thank you.
Please make welcome the conveners of our annual academic lecture, Apostle Tunde and Toyin Balogun, Emeritus Professor Keith Brown, experienced Deputy Manager at New Horizon Care, Danielle Farah, Curate at St. Matthew's, Reverend Urmila Kurkalang, The Bridge, Reverend Canon Yemi Adedeji, Emeritus Professor Keith Brown, Keynote Speaker, Founding Director of the National Centre for Post-Qualifying Social Work and Professional Practice, and he is an Emeritus Professor at Bournemouth University, where the Social Work Department was ranked #1 in the UK in the 2020 Guardian League table. He sits on the DHSC Safeguarding Advisory Board, the joint DHSC and MOJ National Mental Capacity Leadership Forum, and the Home Office Joint Financial Task Force. He has written over 35 textbooks in the fields of social work and leadership, and is particularly known for his contributions in the areas of mental capacity and leadership. Currently, he is writing an all-party parliamentary report looking at financial fraud within families, and he continues to lead research into this area. Since his retirement from a full-time academic post, he has been the independent chair of the NHS Safeguarding Adults National Network and the chair of Love Southampton, a body that represents 3 food banks and 4 debt advice centres in Southampton. Please make welcome Professor Keith Brown.
I look very young, but I'm not that young. I was born in the northwest of England in a wonderful place called Morecambe. No one of you heard of it, but some of you might have heard of Morecambe Bay. But my father was a telephone engineer for the GPO in the 1950s. And he took me as a baby with my mother to a place called Hong Kong. And my father helped build the telephone system in Hong Kong with a company called Cable and Wireless in the 1960s. Really interesting. Dad was involved in putting the first telephone line into China, the first, in 1964, with a full army brigade and a group of tanks for protection. The region now just outside Hong Kong, of course, I forget the name of the town, Shenzhen, is something 20 million people. It was a fishing village in those days. And anyway, I grew up in Hong Kong in the 1960s, came back to this country in 1968, 1969. Why do I tell you that? I was actually like a refugee when I came back to England. England had won the 1966 World Cup football just down the road in Wembley in 1966. I didn't even know what football was. I was a real stranger in this country. I might have been white, I might have been, born here, but I left when I was 1.5, and I did not know England. So much so that in 1970, my mother decided that she'd send me to a church Sunday school so that I could learn about England. What she probably didn't realise is that a year or so later, a very kindly Sunday school teacher took me to Liverpool to see a Bible ship called HMS Logos. And at that moment, I heard a speaker there, and I decided to become a Christian. And that transformed my life in the early 70s. I've been a follower of Jesus for well over 50 years. But in my teenage life, I felt a great conviction and a calling to work with the marginalised and the poor in our society. And that's still what I'm doing today. And I want to share with you that journey of working with the poor, the marginalised, and communities and societies that I've been doing now for over 50 years, 40 odd years as a professional. So that's a bit about my background. I'm going to run through a kind of an overview of welfare in our country, in this country, over the last few centuries, and then focus more about adult social care today and the issues in the 21st century. I think it's fair to say in the 18th and 19th century, you have the 1834 Poor Law. The Poor Law in 1834 trying to differentiate between what was described as deserving and undeserving poor. You read that, you know? Who was deserving and who wasn't deserving. And it was parish relief. The local church would provide some sort of care and support to what was perceived to be the deserving poor, not the undeserving poor. The undeserving poor would be some of the most marginalised in our society. And of course, as we went through the 18th and into the 19th century, people started to want to reform welfare. And it was the church, be of no illusion, it was the church in Britain that led welfare reform. The early hospitals in London were all built by churches and Christian people. The early orphanages, the early schools, that's why we still have so many Church of England schools. Yeah, welfare reform in the end of the 19th century, we're talking sort of 1870 to 1910, wasn't driven by the state, it was driven by people of principle and people who wanted to change the world because they believed that was their calling. And of course, you had people like Wilberforce, who was working to abolish slavery. It's kind of worthwhile noting, though, that there are perceived to be more people in slavery today than there was when Wilberforce abolished it. Yeah, let me say that again. There are more people in slavery today in the world than there was when Wilberforce abolished slavery. So there's still a work to do. Yeah. And through the 20th century, 1900s, 10, 20, 30, welfare was being developed and we saw a perception of the need for better state care and better care for marginalised and poor people. What really changed things was the war. The Second World War was significant. If we could have the next slide, please. Second World War was one of the first times where middle and upper classes mixed with working classes. The officer of the tank or the officer of the unit of people in the war was sat next to, cheek by jowl, working class people. And they started to realise that they were all human beings. It started to break down class divide in a way that had never happened previously in the society in the whole of Britain. If you can go back even further, of course, you've got the landed gentry and the people on the fields. Are you with me? You've got huge gaps. The war fundamentally started to change that. And Churchill, in 1943 to 1944, asked a government civil servant called Beveridge to draw up plans for a new welfare state after the war. Of course, in between the First World War and the Second World War, there'd been huge economic decline and huge poverty. and people wanted to build a better world. Now, I don't know if you know what a green paper or a white paper is from the government. A green paper and a white paper. These are things that the government will give out to signal how it intends to reform things. I don't know if you've ever looked at or read a green paper or a white paper, but the Beveridge Plan of 1944, get this folks, was printed in a pocketbook size so that it could be sent to every serving serviceman and servicewoman throughout the world fighting in the war in 1944. A time when still many people couldn't read and write, but they still got a copy of a government paper signalling the creation of the welfare state. Because what the government was saying through Beveridge is, after the war, we want to have a life, a community, and the phrase was from cradle to grave, where people are cared for at the point of need, regardless of their ability to pay. And so we had the creation of the National Health Service. And so we had the creation of free education to all. And shortly afterwards, we had the creation of social services when adult social care and children's services were merged together under the Seaburn Report in 1972. Men and women all over Europe, all over the world, Japan, the Far East, fighting in the war, reading or having read to them by someone that could read, the hope of a better world after the war. Of course, what was interesting was, although it claimed to be from cradle to grave, as I put on the slide, some bits were not cradle to grave. It took until the 1960s when a lovely Christian lady called Cecily Saunders, working in South London, decided to set up the first hospice specialising in care of the dying, particularly those dying of cancer. And what is interesting today, in my view, is that hospice care is still voluntary. Yeah? The state does not fund hospices. It's something that comes out of voluntary charitable donation. In other words, the state never fully took over the whole process of cradle to grave. And it's taken people like Cecily Saunders, who I met in the 1980s when I trained at St George's in London, in Tooting, as a paediatrician. I forgot to say that part at the beginning because I'm making this up as I go along without notes. So apologies if I keep jumping about. I trained initially there as a paediatrician and met Cecily Saunders before I trained up as a social worker. So we have cradle to grave. We had a welfare state that started in 1948 and onwards through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. During the 1980s, we had a new surge of new thinking, something called free market thinking. Free market thinking in this country, actually interesting enough, was brought about by a Hungarian called Hayek. In the 1970s, Hungary was under the control of the Russians in the communist state, and a lot of people wanted freedom, and they were encouraged by the Americans. I'm telling you this story because it repeats itself in history many times, to overthrow the communist leaders of Russia and to set themselves free. And in 1957, they did that and they rose up, and nothing happened. Nobody went to their help, and the Russians came in with tanks and drove over people. Hayek fled and came to this country and became an economist and a professor of economics. And he came up with a very radical and different form of philosophical thinking about state and society. He came up with the notion of free market thinking. Now, some people now would see that as what classically we refer to as Thatcherism. The idea that we should be responsible mainly and primarily for ourselves and not for each other. And he questioned, why should I be forced to pay tax to pay for your benefits? Yeah? The idea that I should have the responsibility for myself and my own family primarily, and not to have to be concerned about the interest in others in society. And Hayek's free market thinking is still having an impact today. So when you hear politicians talking about, we want a smaller state, we want to roll back the boundaries of the state, what they're saying is, we want a smaller state, i.e. raise less tax, so that society and people can be responsible themselves, i.e. you keep more of your wealth and you insure yourself. And that motivates you not to be unemployed. It motivates you not to be lazy in their thinking. Does that make sense? And even if you say things like, okay, but what about the disabled, or what about the marginalized, or what about the elderly? The answer in their thinking is, well, you can insure against that. Yeah? Take out an insurance policy. Save up for a pension. You fundamentally are responsible for yourself, not the state. And so we've still got this clash today. How much is it a responsibility of the state to care, support, and how much is it the responsibility of the individual to make their own provision? And in many ways, I would argue that in social policy terms, we're going back to that 19th century situation where the state is no longer fully responsible. It's individuals through communities and often the church that provides the support. And I'm going to give you some examples of that and how that's working as I speak through and talk further. So my next slide, please. Thinking about issues for society today. I sometimes hear this phrase, we're all living longer. Yeah? That's not technically true. There are very few 140-year-olds. Yeah? The technical correct way is more of us get to old age. Does that make sense? So there's far more over 85-year-olds, but there's nobody 120. So we're not living longer, it's just that more of us get to old age. A technical difference, yeah, it just annoys me slightly when people use the wrong phrase. That's just because I'm a saddo academic. Now, I want to tell you a few stories, and these are true through my work. As a little intro said, I still, although I retired a number of years ago, I still lead the research into fraud and scams. Now, a few years ago, a good few years ago now, probably about 9, I was doing some research for the National Trading Standards Scams team, looking at mail fraud, junk mail coming through the door. And I visited an elderly gentleman, and he had in his garden 3 garden sheds full of tat, junk. He got so much junk mail. If you get more than 10 letters a day to your house, by the way, the local postie can't deliver it because it's too heavy. So we had a personalised delivery service from Royal Mail of junk mail. And I said to this gentleman, I said, do you not realise this is all junk mail? Because in his dining room, in his chaos of his house, he had a nice, neat table with a writing pad with paper and pens and stamps. And he said this to me, and it had a profound impact on my life. He said this, he said, the only reason I have to get up in the morning, the only reason I have for living is to wait for the postman to arrive and deliver the mail, and I respond to whatever's come through. He was so lonely that his only outlook on life was via scam and fraud mail. Now, this was doubly reinforced for me a few years later when I had a large research grant from the government, which is always nice, to install, part of the grant was to install telephone call blockers. How many of us had phone calls from someone trying to scam us out of money? It happens all the time, doesn't it? Yeah. But in particular, it's a real problem for the people that Tunde was talking about earlier. Yeah, the people who are getting a bit older, slightly memory, early stage of dementia, much more easy to get conned. And so the idea of this was that we were going to put call blocking technology in older people, vulnerable older people's homes where they'd previously been scammed of some money. And my job was to go around not my team's job, was to go around and to assess the impact on these people's lives. Yeah, the idea was, if you stop getting scam calls, your life's better and you're a happy bunny. Yeah. So we were looking at a well-being scale to see how much better people's well-being was when the call blocking technology stopped the scam calls. It was the most complex, difficult, and problematic piece of research I've ever done in my life. For this reason. People who had been getting 20 or 30 or 40 calls a week from criminals trying to defraud them of their money suddenly got no phone calls whatsoever. And they literally disconnected the call blocking technology because they would rather have a criminal speak to them than be that lonely. And it ruined the research. And I was not able to show the value of call blocking technology because too many people switched it off. Because in our society today, there are people who would rather have criminals speak to them than nobody. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to get much more excited here because I hope I've been asked to come and preach. And I want to talk about a bit more tomorrow, the role of the church and its potential to help lonely people. I am tired of church leaders telling me that there's no one coming to their church anymore and no one's interested. Trust me, if there are people in your community that would rather speak to a criminal than nobody because they're so lonely, surely they'd rather speak to you. You're a friendly bunch. I've arrived today, you've offered me coffee, you said hello. Get out there, find them. Yeah? Society is in a massive crisis with loneliness. A massive crisis. We just simply do not know how we're going to care for, look after, and deal with those thousands and thousands of people who are living alone at home, who would rather have a criminal speak to them than nobody. One of the next big issues for adult social care is that we've contractually put out to contract lots of services, pushed down the prices so that our care home staff and our people that visit us in our homes are paid so little that virtually nobody wants to do the job. And even if you're the wealthiest person in Britain, there are parts of the country now where you will struggle to be able to employ people to come and care for you because they just don't do it. When I used to work for Hampshire Social Services decades ago, we had 1,400 home helps on the books of the council. They tended to be middle-class women going around on their bicycles or whatever, going out to help the lonely and the elderly in their local communities. They weren't paid a lot, but they felt good about doing that job. They worked for the council and they went out to help people. Yeah? Some bright spark, politician, don't know, I'm not going to name anything, decided that we could save money if we got rid of all the council staff and we went out to contract and we drove the prices down. And those sorts of people were quite happy to work for the council and feel good about what they were doing, but they were not so happy to work for Joe Blogg's PLC, private company, making money out of care on minimum wage. And they disappeared. And now what do we have? 35% of people in general hospitals up and down the land being elderly people who are perfectly well, that they can't discharge because there's nowhere for them to go. And then what do you have? You have ambulance queues outside the hospital waiting to be discharged, if you're lucky, onto a bed in a corridor. And then you've got ambulance crews then suddenly not able to come and visit you on a 999 because they're all backed up in the hospital waiting to offload their patients. There was one hospital on the south, I better not name these places because you're all videoing and recording this, I'm going to probably get lynched. End of my political career, advising government. The ambulance department was so frustrated about the inability to discharge patients out of the ambulance. This is going to sound crazy, but it's true. They bought a coach, stripped out all the seats, and put the trolleys in a coach so you could have 8, 9, or 10 trolleys in a coach rather than 8, 9, or 10 ambulances to free up the ambulances to move out. You know, rather than sort the problem, we sort the problem by just some stupid ways, don't we? The welfare state in many areas is really at breaking point or beyond breaking point. The problem we're having today is literally, can the government raise tax to pay for a better welfare state? Or is the prevailing thought we all want to pay less tax and have free market thinking and individual responsibility and the state not to provide? That is the challenge and the rub that's going on. Now, tomorrow, if you happen to want to turn up here, I will tell you what I believe as a Christian should be done. Today, I want to just talk to you a bit more as a professional and as a professor about the reality of what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Next slide. One of the things I really like to do is find evidence and do things to challenge orthodoxy or to challenge the government's position. In the last 10 years, I met an awful lot of politicians from a particular political party who were arguing that the church was causing a problem by having food banks. I'll say that again. The church was causing a problem by having food banks. The problem was, by having food banks, people were using the food banks and they didn't really need to use the food banks in their view, and actually there was never really a problem, and they wished that they would just disappear and start having more and more and more food banks. So I was quite fortunate, I thought, one day when I was able to get a large government grant from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, driven at the time by the minister called Michael Gove. He gave me a lot of money to do some research into food banks. Now, one of the little roles I have is I chair something called Love Southampton. Love Southampton is a body that represents all the churches in Southampton, its social action. So we have debt advice agencies, we have food banks, we do all the work with refugees in the city. And my job was to look at the food delivery through food banks and what difference it made. And my team and I, we went to some schools and we met the family liaison officers of the secondary schools, and they said this: we can tell the weeks when the food is delivered as opposed to the weeks when the food is not delivered, because at that time we were going in every other week to the schools. Because on the weeks when food is not delivered, we have pupils who cannot concentrate for a day at school because they are so hungry. So again, we have pupils in our school in the 21st century in Great Britain, the 5th richest economy in the world, who are so hungry that they cannot concentrate for a day and learn. And I love writing that. And I love writing that in the report that was there a minute ago, that looks like this, with a government department logo, to say to the government, hey guys, this is important. Yeah? This is the case what we're in. Stop telling me we have a welfare state from cradle to grave. It is fundamentally broken. There are old people that can't get care. There are people that are backing up outside hospitals waiting for care. There are people that can't get enough food to even concentrate for a day at school because they are so fundamentally hungry in the 21st century. And the only people, it appears, making a difference about it are the church. Love Southampton had been around for about 10 years, and I picked up the mantle of independent chair during the pandemic. Every local authority in the land was given money by the government to physically, literally almost, sweep up homeless, marginalised people on the street and accommodate them temporarily. The concern was if we had people wandering around, we might spread COVID. Southampton City Council swept up all the marginalised homeless people and put them into temporary accommodation, predominantly bed and breakfast hotels. Because they were in effect the landlord and responsible for these people, they had a technical duty to feed them. How do you feed people in a pandemic as a council? How do you feed them particularly at the weekend? How do you feed them on a bank holiday? How do you feed them when actually most of your staff have gone because you've shrunk the welfare state so much the council's got no staff left? So they approached the church. They approached me and said, can we do something about it? And we said, yeah, we the churches of Southampton, we'll feed every homeless person in temporary accommodation for the whole of the pandemic. And that's what we did. We built a relationship with the council so that I had regular meetings with the chief exec, leader of the council, and other people to say, we are the church, we are the churches. We want to work together. And it just opened up all sorts of opportunities. Whereas a decade beforehand, a group of church leaders had gone to see the director of children's services to talk about the issues of childcare in our society, and they were literally marched out the council offices and told to go away. And within 10 years, we turned it round, that we had weekly calls with the council. We have one of the largest food distribution units in Southampton called The Big Difference. We're giving out in excess of £1.5 million worth, 20 tons of food a month, out of a building that is a council building, and they give it to us as £1 a month, £1 a year rent. As I said, come on guys, what's your deal? And I found an old building, it was the old council rent office that had been closed for a while. I said, I want that building and I'll give you £1 a year for it. Our food bank, interesting enough, is not quite like yours here. Great that you're doing it, trust the trust. We have no food donations. We don't even buy food. We don't collect money to buy food, apart from sometimes exceptional foodstuffs we can't get. Our food bank is done on redistribution of food. Do you know if you're a supermarket or a wholesaler, if you go into a Booker's, you see those big trolleys full of food with a forklift truck. It costs you, Booker's or a hotel or something, £200 to tip the food, tipping tax. So we went there and we said, rather than spending £200 per container to dispose of your food, we'll take it off your hands. And we get all of our food donated by large corporations. And now clothing. You know Tesco's? If you buy clothes in Tesco's and you take them back, those clothes do not go back on the rail. Previously, they were just disposed of because they didn't want to clean them and sterilise them. We get them now, and we can provide school uniforms at knockdown prices at pennies to all the local community. It's just about being creative in your ideological thinking about what we can do and how we can do it. and transforming societies through those sorts of things. And I sit there working with all these people. I think it's just incredible and amazing. And the second report is this one I did a year afterwards, was an evaluation on faith-based organisations on refugee integration. The churches in Southampton are responsible for all the integration of refugees in the city. We're a port, and we have a lot of people coming in. We've had a lot of Iranians, we've had classically Ukrainians, we've had the Hong Kong Chinese, illegal immigrants, all these sorts of things. And we are the body that provides English language cafes. We are the body that provides guidance and support to help people understand how to register for a GP, how to take your children to school, all these sorts of things. All done to the churches of Southampton. And that report, and you can download all of these reports off my website, profkeith.com, if you're really interested, tells the story of how churches in Southampton opened up that welfare provision for adults, some of the most vulnerable and marginalised, coming from other countries with nothing, who just needed help, but the council did not have the resources or the funds or the ability to support or help them. The church is filling the gap, not the state and not professionals. If we could just turn to the next slide. Do it one at a time. Can we do it one at a time, or does it matter? This is it should come up one at a time rather than the whole slide. It should be on a clicker. It's because you've not given me clickability, guys. Come on, I've got no control. I'm a professor. I'll just read it out. This is a genuine transcript of a radio conversation between a US naval ship and the Canadian authorities off the coast of Newfoundland in October 1995. The Americans were heard to say this: divert your course 15 degrees north to avoid a collision. And the Canadians responded with, recommend that you divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. You can tell what's going to happen here, can't you? Yeah? So the Americans came back with, this is the captain of a US Navy ship, and I say again, divert your course. And the Canadians said, nope. I say again, divert your course. So the Americans weighed in with this. This is true. This is not made up. This genuinely actually happened and was overheard by a radio ham who recorded it. Said this: this is the aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln. This is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Yeah? The second largest ship in the US Atlantic Fleet. We're accompanied by 3 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and numerous support vessels. And I demand that you change your course 15 degrees north. That's 15 degrees north, or countermeasures will be undertaken to ensure the safety of the ship. And the Canadians responded with, we're a lighthouse, you're cool. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with qualified navigators, yes, qualified navigators, radar, radio, the whole caboodle, was sailing towards a rock. Not just any rock, a dangerous rock, so dangerous someone put a lighthouse on it with a flashing light and a big foghorn and a big signal saying, do not come here, danger, you will be destroyed. And the arrogance was they wanted the rock to move. And I'm telling you this because I believe today the rock that society is about to hit is a complete absence of understanding of how we're going to care for particularly older people in our society. And you can't just say, move the rock, move the problem. It is here. And for some of us, it's here quite soon because we might be one of those, And I'm hoping that my son will be wanting to look after me. It's really important, isn't it, to think through what we do. Some of these things take a long time, though. Some of you might have read in the press last week that the banks are now able to delay payments for 4 days to check whether it's a fraud or a scam, particularly around romance fraud. I started that campaign work 9 years ago with an all-party parliamentary report. You can read the report on my site again. I started a campaign to say, banks, you need to have a delayed payment system so that vulnerable people don't lose everything and it's that, because basically what criminals are doing was transferring the money out of the country in 30 seconds and you never get it back. At the time, people said to me, you'll never do it, Keith. The minister said, they can't do it. Faster payments is what we want. The systems won't allow it. Now, this is wrong. And 9 years of sweat and 4.5 years after I retired, I was delighted that last week they actually got around to doing something about it. And next week, 10th of October, for the first time ever, if you're defrauded up to £85,000 through something called an authorised push payment, I was talking to our colleague over here from the finance world earlier on, the bank's guaranteed to give you your money back within 5 days. 10th of October, 9 years of work. And what's really cool, I was able to persuade the financial service industry that your bank pays half and the receiving bank pays a half, to try and persuade banks to stop holding criminals' accounts.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. 10th of October next week, 85,000, but it was meant to be £400,000, by the way. I didn't win that battle. I'm still on it. Because the government is saying most people don't lose up to more than £85,000. Trust me, some elderly people lose their whole life savings. These are major, major issues. The point I wanted to make is that it took years. It took years. And for those of us who want to be involved in this work, and those of us that want to make a difference in society, I want to remind you, it's no shortcut. It's a life. It's a life that started for me in a Sunday school in 1972, outside Manchester in a council estate, when I was called to be a Christian and I felt called to work with the marginalised and spent a whole life. I wasn't always a professor. I was once a junior. People often say to me, it's all right for you, Keith, you're a professor. Well, I'm not always a professor. To work hard to become a professor. What's fascinating, now that I've become one, I have more influence now. I had more influence in the last 5 or 10 years with government than when I was junior. It's a long haul is the point I'm trying to make. Wilberforce did not abolish slavery overnight. It took him years. In fact, it only happened just before he died. What's your calling? What are you interested in? Are you going to go all the way? If you want to hear more about it, come back tomorrow. I'll be far more passionate then, I can assure you. Yeah? We have the opportunity to have an influence in our society, to make a difference, to make a change. My last slide, please. I don't want to talk for too long because I'd like to take some questions and have some debates and discussions with you. I don't quite know what that clock means. Does that mean at 20 minutes I explode or I should shut up? There's a big clock that's counting down that you can't see. So my questions I want to ask us all, and then maybe we can have some discussion and some debate. And if you want to ask some technical questions, I'm more than happy to do that with you. What sort of society do we or you want to live in the future? Do you want a society that is cradle to grave? Or do you want a society that says, no, don't pay tax, keep your own money, look after yourself? Does that make sense? And insure or manage? Where do you want to go with that? Next thought and question is, who will support the lonely and the elderly in the next coming few years? I chair 3 safeguarding boards. And one of the top 3 issues that I have in the safeguarding boards today is a concern that cometh tomorrow, whenever that is, there aren't going to be enough nurses to care. During the pandemic, clap for the NHS, we saw a surge of people applying to be trained to be nurses, social workers, carers, blah, 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 blah. Since then, it's collapsed. Across the country this year, there are 25% fewer people training to be nurses. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, you know. Who wants to train to be a nurse, pay £9,500 a year, university fees, have to work on a placement for free so you can't work, da-di-da-di-da. In 3 years' time, the number of people coming off the nurse training train is down by a quarter. Up the road in Reading, it's down by, just west of here a little bit, it's down by 40%. Now, it can't get the staff today. You're certainly not going to get the staff in 3 years' time. These are major, major issues. Yeah. Will society be prepared to do more? And will society be prepared to fund it? Or fundamentally, will we end up back in the 19th century, where the welfare state is really driven by the church, and we have to take the lead, not just in small areas, but we're running schools, we're running care homes, we're running hospitals. And you think that's crazy? No, we already run all the hospices. Think about it. Or will it be left to somebody else? Where will we go? What will be the future of our society, the fifth largest, richest economy in the world, where in the last 20 years, some of the most wealthy members of our society have become significantly and fundamentally exceptionally wealthy, whereas people at the other end of the scale have become more and more isolated, more and more lonely, and more in need. Is that clock possible to turn back? Once you've got used to being very, very wealthy, once you've got used to paying very little tax because you can afford very clever accountants to make sure you don't pay tax, can you go back to a situation where people are prepared? These are huge challenges in our society that, in my view, are actually only going to be possibly altered and changed if the hearts and the souls of the people in the society are changed to one in which we actually start to think about our responsibilities to fellow mankind, to our neighbours, to people around us. I hope you found that interesting. I could talk a lot about all sorts of things: older people care, mental capacity, end-of-life care. I'm currently working with the work on assisted suicide. By the way, not in the case of looking for assisted suicide, but I'm working with Wes Streeting to sort of remind him, and he's going public at the moment, isn't he, to say that his concern is the desire for assisted suicide is actually a reflection of the poor quality of end-of-life care. And if we have better end-of-life care, we won't need it so much. My concern is linked to that. How many people are going to be saying, Mum, Gran, you've had a good life. Take the tablet, we can inherit the house and the money, and you don't have to go into care. That's a major issue. I'm just beginning to explore at the moment the whole issues of fraud within families. And I'm going to end with this thought. It was Brown, this Brown, in the 1980s that wrote The Screaming Secret. The Screaming Secret was one of the early texts proposing that there was an issue of child sexual abuse. Do you know what we called child abuse in 1979? Hint, we didn't call it child abuse. We called it a non-accidental injury. And it was only 1980, 1981 that we even thought about the concept of child abuse. And at that time, it was physical abuse. And the government campaigns were things like stranger danger. Some dodgy man down the road is the one causing the physical abuse. Be aware of the stranger. And then as the 80s went along, we started to realise that a lot of abuse actually was within the family. And there was a sexual abuse as well as emotional abuse. And when I wrote that early work, I was chastised. People thought I was a nutter. An absolute, gone stir-crazy madman for daring to suggest that sexual abuse of children could be caused by a family member. No one wanted to listen to that. I kept going and I kept going. Now, authorised social worker, it's normal. But we know all about it now. We're in the same place with older people as we were back then in the 1980s. We're not understanding the scale of the problem. We're ignoring it simply because they're so isolated, they're so lonely, we don't even hear their voices. Yeah? Because they're taking out the call blocking technology to listen to criminals, and we don't even listen to them. There's a challenge for Youth Church, isn't it? All of us. So, I hope you found it interesting. I don't know how we'll do questions and answers, but I'll be very happy to do so.
That was an exciting explosion of knowledge, inspiration, and awareness of what we need to know. Now, we have a window to just ask very pertinent question, probably two, a couple we can take now, and then we're going to ask to take a few more later on. So if you would like to just ask immediate question now, okay, right.
And be warned, if you don't ask questions, I'll say some more things.
Yes, let's
got
take
11 minutes. Come on, Tunde.
Reverend Andy, can we take that, please?
Thank you so much for a very stimulating presentation and really challenging. I was struck by your comment that the churches in Southampton have really come together to have a major impact on the city. Can I ask what is the main mechanism by which the churches are communicating with one another? Is it through churches together, or is there a special sort of committee of church leaders who convene?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, this is a bit churchy for those of you that are not in it, but it required a translator. And by that, what I mean is it required a translator to translate between church language and local authority language. Because most church leaders are so busy running the church, they don't know how to talk to other people outside the church. And that's why I became the independent chair. And I particularly recognised this once when I was with 4 church leaders who were all on the evangelical spectrum of churchmanship, who were meeting with the mayor because the mayor used to go to church. But what they hadn't realised, she went to a church that was a very old-fashioned URC church that was very far from the evangelical wing. And the church leaders here were talking about churches together in Southampton, and she was talking about churches together, but there were 2 different togethernesses. And halfway through the conversation, I had to remind them that they weren't even talking about the same togethernesses. And so a lot of it has been about helping them understand how to communicate and how to actually be brave and not be scared. And actually, how do we stand up and say we can do, and earning your spurs, that you're not just going to do your flash in the pan, do it today and then gone tomorrow. Yeah? So if you're going to do things, keep at it, keep going. And you might need to have some assistance translating.
Good. All right.
Any other questions?
Should we take, let's take that.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the enlightenment for us to understand more about social care. So my question is, given the shift from communal responsibility towards individualism and the increased role of the church in filling the gaps in social welfare, do you believe it's possible for the state to reestablish a balance between individual responsibility and collective care?
Whoa.
And if so, what changes in policy or societal mindset would be required to achieve this?
That's next year's lecture. because I do passionately believe it, but it's only going to occur, in my view, when we, the church, and others, it doesn't have to be people from church, but we need to have them on a similar view, have a sense of calling. We have a sense that actually human life matters and that we need to care appropriately. And the church has got to learn to start to influence society, to go back to that. The world of caring for your community is a better world to live in than the world that says individualism, them that are successful do very well and the rest tough. We have to start challenging that sort of ideological thinking and as church start living that understanding. And I am going to tell you a couple of little more things because that clock says 7 minutes, so I'm going to take that as I've got 7 more minutes, and tough anyway because I'm here. I want to ask you a question. It's genuine little questions. My son is a very, 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 very clever scientist, a physicist. Okay, and I used to always say I want to make a difference, and my son always says he wants to make something that makes a difference. And he's got a couple of world firsts out in material science and infrared detectors and all this sort of thing. He told me this a few years ago. So here's a question for you. Are there more stars in the known universe, or are there more grains of sand on Earth? Right? Think about that. Grains of sand, on a lot of grains of sand on a lot of beaches throughout the whole of the Earth. Yeah, that grains of sand on the whole of the Earth, or more stars in the known visible universe? Answer? Someone saying sand, someone saying stars. There are thought to be 100,000 stars per grain of sand. Right. Think that how big a number that is, right? How many stars there are in the world. That, most of you know, don't you? What is the chemical formula for water? H2O. And what does that mean, chemists? It means 2 hydrogen atoms stuck to 1 oxygen atom, yeah? 5 drops of water is the same number of atoms as stars in the universe. There are the same number of hydrogen and oxygens in 5 drops of water as stars in the universe, which is 100,000 times more than grains of sand on this earth, yeah? And I believe God made it all. Now, why do I believe that? Because science proved that God doesn't exist until 20 years ago. Do you understand when a car goes by on a motorway, it goes, meow, yeah? That's called the Doppler effect. As the sound's coming towards you, it makes one different sound to when it's going away from you. Exactly the same with light, red and blue shift. Look at stars at the edge of the galaxy. You can tell whether they're coming towards Earth or away. Red or blue light shift. We now know, scientists now know, everyone knows this. The Earth, the universe is expanding faster. It's accelerating. Big Bang Theory is a load of tosh. No scientist in the world believes in the Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory, big explosion, it all happens, but then of course over time energy dissipates and it slows down. No, it's accelerating. We don't know why. Quantum physics, get this, quantum physics. One of those electrons, and then there's an electron around every hydrogen atom, and there are the same number of hydrogen and oxygen atoms in 5 drops of water as stars in the universe that we can see, which is more than the grains of sand on the Earth. Yeah? Quantum physics tells us that an electron here can have a relationship with an electron over there 10,000 miles away, and we have no idea what causes that relationship. Not a Scooby-Doo of a clue. You can measure it, you can see it, and it's quantum physics. My son makes transistors at an atomic scale. 13 atoms of palladium, 8 atoms of arsenide creates a switch. It's going to create a new computer, quantum computing. Going to transform the whole world in the next few years, yeah? He has to deal with the effects of quantum physics. They don't have a clue what causes it. But we know there are relationships and forces and powers that we have no idea what they are. They're not electric, they're not waves, they're not light, they're nothing, but they are there. And they even start talking about it as scientists, as godlike forces. Scientists now recognize there must be a creator of something. It's not random Big Bang. We need to wake up. We need to grow up as church. We need to start thinking, whoa, it's here. So that's the answer to your question. When we believe that actually there is something bigger than us. And when we accept that and respond to that and start saying because of that, we have a duty of care, that will start to influence society. I'm sorry that's a bit of a theological answer to that, but I think it's so true. And
I don't want you to lose track of those very inspiring questions that Keith mentioned to us at the end of his lecture. Let me just remind you, what sort of society do we want to live in the future? Because that's why we're here. We're here to project into the future. Who will support the lonely and the elderly? Will society be prepared to do more and fund it? Will we end up back in the 19th century with the church taking the lead in welfare, or will somebody else do that? It's important for us to hold this very, very clearly if we want to take something out of today. Because we are here because we feel the duty to be part of a solution. And I'm hoping and trusting that there's something that is stirring up on the inside of you where you are sat, and you are looking at what is it that I can do and what is it that we can achieve together. As we take the discussion further this morning, we're going to be listening to the next perspective in our discussion. And Keith made a whole mention of the professional part of what we are talking about today. And we have a lady here that is going to do so much justice. I'll tell you how I got to know her. Some of her staffs came to me when we immediately announced that we want to have this lecture. Some of our staffs came to me and said, Pastor, if we can get this lady, she's so good. If you can get her to come, it'll be fantastic. And they gave me her number, well, after asking her. They gave me her number. And I spoke to her that day. Well, I chatted with you first, isn't it? You're on holidays. Sorry, I disturbed your holiday. I was all on her case. But by the time I eventually spoke to her, I truly appreciate what her staffs were saying. They spoke so well of you. And the media team are going to make a welcome for you. And then you just come up and let us have the perspective from the professional angle.
Danielle Farrer is a dedicated and experienced deputy manager at New Horizon Care, where she has been serving since October 2019. In her role, Danielle oversees 2 medium to high-risk mental health placements, supporting individuals with a range of diagnoses, including learning disabilities, autism, and schizophrenia. With a strong background in communication, leadership, and conflict resolution, she ensures that recovery-focused services are delivered to vulnerable clients with mental health and complex needs. Danielle is known for her ability to manage operations efficiently, ensuring that all services comply with current legislation while fostering consistency and excellence within her team. With over a decade of experience in the care sector, Danielle has developed expertise in strategic planning, performance evaluation, and training. She also holds a Level 5 Leader in Adult Care qualification and has hands-on experience in personal care, medication administration, and care plan management. Danielle's resilience, leadership, and commitment to improving the quality of care make her a valuable asset in the mental health and social care field. Please make welcome Danielle Farah.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited and looking forward to the opportunity just to give you some insight of my career within adult social care. I have worked for New Horizon Care now for the past 6 years, dealing with a range of diagnoses, as you've seen from the slides. I first started working for the elderly with diagnosis of dementia care. I started driving at the age of 17 and wanted to go out and earn some money, and I found a job in the newspaper, going round to the local houses, people that had dementia or could no longer weight bear. I partnered with a friend and we spent our Friday and Saturday nights driving around, caring for people in the local area. And that gave me an insight into how many people needed support and care in our local areas. I was young. There was not a lot of people of my age looking to go into careers like that. But it really gave me an insight into the career that I wanted to develop for myself. As you have seen from the slides, I now manage 2 medium to high risk mental health homes, one being a mixed service, one being all male. My mixed service has a range of diagnosis from learning disability to schizophrenia, and my male service has lots of different diagnoses such as learning disability, autism, and again schizophrenia. I enjoyed my role working with the elderly, but I saw that they had led a good quality of life and had great stories to tell me. But it made me think about the people that don't have great quality of life and may have not so many positive stories to tell me, once they're at that age. You'll also know, working in Ickenham and Ruislip, there's lots of traffic on a Friday and Saturday night. So, I learned to develop patience and could easily, manage stress. But with this type of role, I wanted to then begin working with other people to give them a good quality of life. And after 15 years of working with the elderly and having my 2 children, I decided to move into a different area of social care. I'd spent many years looking at how the elder generation had lived their lives before coming unwell, and I realised how much the world had changed, and I wanted to work with people who had not had the best start in life due to various reasons. In 2019, I decided to take an opportunity of working with New Horizon Care, which is an organisation supporting people with medium to high complex needs. It's supporting them to learn new skills, develop knowledge, and to help promote independency with the goal that one day they may be able to live independently. In some cases they will, and in some cases they will stay with us. But with us, they are able to have a good quality of life. Our aim is to build their confidence, their knowledge, and social networks, to treat them as individuals who deserve respect, to not be discriminated against, and to be given the freedom of choice. The Equality Act 2010 is a piece of legislation providing framework ensuring individuals receive services that are respectful, effective, and accessible. In 2020, when COVID hit, this was a very hard time for myself and my team. The organisation, and also with Brexit, we lost many skilled workers, and this increased the workload for all of my staff. But as a team, we managed to get through the other side, but still from lockdown, there has been a decline in people applying for jobs within the social care sector. New Horizon Care has allowed me the opportunity to develop my career, and since 2019, I have managed to complete my NVQs in adult social care up to my level 5, where I will now gain my registration, where I'll be able to open my own care home and help other people in crisis. As we were speaking before, some people are stuck in hospitals because there's no way for them to be discharged to. Eventually, I would like to open my own home, so it gives them an opportunity to gain that support. 11 years ago, my manager opened his first home with 1 service user and 1 home. We are now opening our 8th home with 65 service users. What I have learned during this job has enabled me to support others at work and have encouraged and motivated them to develop and progress in their own personal goals. My current team leaders came into social care with business management degrees as junior support workers, but have challenged themselves to try something new and are now thriving, enjoying climbing the career ladder within social care. It really is great to see the encouragement and relationships built within the teams, supporting each other to succeed, and this has a positive impact on the care that is provided. We have had service users that have come into our care who have eventually moved into their own home and gained employment or qualifications in various courses. We currently have service users in education, 6-week short courses such as art therapy, gardening, and photography. And it is rewarding to know that myself and my team have worked very hard to get them where they are today. This month, we will be going on our first holiday, which is something we haven't done before. The service users who will be going on this holiday came to us as 2 to 1 and could not access the community without any incident. So the progress that they have made with the support of myself and my team is excellent. Seeing their joy is the best part of my job. Making the vital differences to their lives, watching them achieve. The huge responsibility that comes with the job is balanced out when you see the progress that they are making. I'm very grateful to the staff, some being dotted around the room today. And I have learnt it's very important to praise and remind your staff that you could not do it without them. Being a leader is not a position, it's an action, and I will continue to support my team to support these people who have needs in the community. If you have ever or are thinking of a career in social care, you will just need your natural qualities, and training will be provided on the job. It's not easy, but it's worth it, and we are recruiting in the local areas to try and make a difference to people's lives. If you want to do something important and care for others, working in adult social care, there are so many opportunities for you to make a difference to people's lives and for those to make a difference to yours. It's taught me to be humble, patient, and to appreciate my family and the people I work with. This has allowed me to see how lucky I am to have these people in my lives, and it's encouraged me to thrive and learn and develop in my own personal career. If you'd like to take on a challenge, or you've always had an interest in the social care sector, or you'd want to change in your career, New Horizon Care will allow you these opportunities. So please take the time to have a look at our website to see the work that we do and read the reviews from family and friends who have had loved ones within our care. Thank you for all coming today and allowing me the opportunity to speak to you about how important it is to support other people, to support people in our local areas. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful. Let's before you go to seat, Danielle.
So these are some of my service users and my staff and the range of activities that we do. I work closely with the Hillingdon Social Services, get them into short courses of education, art therapy, shopping, going out into the activity. This lady here She would not leave her room at all when we initially went to assess her. She's thriving. She attends education weekly, bingo classes. She's widened her social network. You know, it would be boring for me to sit at work and do nothing. So on the days that, you know, there is no work, we plan activities and we do lots of things with our service users. As you can see, they're all very, very happy.
Excellent. Let me ask you a question, Danielle. You said to me one of the days we were talking that you started this career at the age of 16.
Yeah, so I've always been close to, you know, my family, my grandparents. I used to spend a lot of time, you know, helping my grandparents when I was younger. And yeah, I just saw a job advertised one day. It was involved in care. I went round as part of a double-up team with someone else, then got my own round. I encouraged another friend to come and work with me, and we worked up as a double-up team. Right with the elderly, right up until I, you know, had my children. Then I felt, you know, I needed to work with people to give them a good quality of life. I saw, as was mentioned, how many people that are lonely, you know, in elderly age. I wanted to work with people where I could widen social network, get them into a range of different activities, so they had stories to tell me at an age, because the world is so different now, you know, of positive stories rather than negative. So I decided to go and work with people, you know, that hadn't had the best start in life.
Good. Yeah. So in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, and in the future, are we going to have more 16-year-old going into social care?
Hopefully we will, yes. My next step, my next goal is to go into teaching within adult social care. So, fantastic. You know, encouraging people to work within social care, going into schools. Good. And speaking about, you know, how important it is to care for others.
Wonderful. Make sure you go to churches as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Let's give it to her. Let's just appreciate her. Excellent. Excellent. Wonderful.
Reverend Canon Yemi Adedeji, Theology Perspective. Canon Yemi is the CEO of RYA Consultants, where he delivers strategic advice and insights to help leaders both in charity and business across the globe. He is a leadership coach, author, conference speaker, and regular commentator at BBC. He sits and chairs various corporate boards and charities in UK. Rev Yemi, popularly known as The Bridge, is an ordained priest of the Anglican Church and also serves as a pastor at Jesus House, London. He was a 2-term governor at the London School of Theology and currently serves as one of the governors at CRC Bible College in London. Please make welcome Reverend Canon Yemi Adedeji.
Good afternoon. First, let me acknowledge the convener for this academic lecture, because it is on their platform that we are able to bring these conversations. So please help me appreciate Apostle Tunde and Apostle Tony for understanding the job they are doing, and all the wonderful people who are helping here. Listen to Professor Keith, you know, I'm like, am I really needed here? What a man that is full of wisdom, knowledge. In fact, you make many theological perspectives I want to bring. It makes it look as if I'm a wannabe. So you just pardon me. You know, I wish I've spoken first, because I don't think I'm going to say anything that's going to make sense, especially when a professor is sitting down here. But let's dive into a little bit of my stupid theology, if there's anything like that. Anyway, so in my kind of unpacking this, you know, I kind of realized that after COVID, there has been a different dimension into how the whole adult care system is and the way it affects from a theological perspective. You know, and looking at the volume of people that are involved, you know, 55 billion people, you know, they said is involved. I realized that 1.52 million people are working in social care, and they are catering for 835,000 people. So a theological engagement could therefore be seen as a key to ensure that the church is able to meaningfully and critically engage with the public, especially in responding to and actively shaping a narrative around this care and caring. I must say that the theological perspective may not be the mainstream that shapes the government policy of public discourse. It will, however, inform the way in which we all think about adult social care and respond to it, both individually and collectively as a faith community. So let's look at some of the biblical foundation care. For me, one of the first things, having a 97-year-old Albert not living in this country, so I understand what adult social care means, the amount of volume of money that is involved in it. There's the human creation being created in the image of God. So the theological narrative of adult social care begins with the understanding of human being as being created in the image of God. So the foundational concept postulates that everyone has inherent dignity, worth of value, whether you are young or you are old. So adult social care, therefore, flows from a commitment to uphold the dignity of godlike image that God created humanity irrespective of age. So this aligns basically with a theological view that honors human dignity and personal choice. So understanding adult social care necessitates an exploration of an ethical principle, the autonomy which acknowledges individual rights to make decisions about their own lives. So Professor was talking about so many things towards the end. That will be for debate later. Now, the theology of benevolence in adult care speaks to the duty of care provider to act in the best interest of those they serve. So these ethical principles is derived from the biblical mandate to love and serve others. It's so important. It acknowledges that care should aim not only to alleviate suffering, but also to enhance the well-being of individuals. So theologically, the care of older adults also reflects the honoring of wisdom and life experience and exemplify. So in the Proverbs chapter 16:31, it says, "Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness." The number two things I want us to have looked at is the call to love. See, in the Old Testament, the call to love one's neighbor plays a crucial role in understanding social care in any context. So in Leviticus 19:18, God commands that you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. This command does not restrict itself to those who are similar or familiar, but extend to all humanity, emphasizing a radical inclusivity that shapes the ethos of adult social care. So equally in the New Testament, Matthew 22:39, Jesus commands that we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. This without doubt provoke individual or corporate bodies to respond by providing for people in need, especially those on the margins, like the elderly. So this calls for us to pause for a moment and ask whether it is applicable to adult social care also. Arguably, care and caring through practical responses to human needs could be seen as a central theme to our own Christian teaching and pastoral care. So this pastoral response or practical response of care, whether through paid work or unpaid informal care, must be explored through the spiritual and theological lens that responds to human need with loving kindness and compassion. So the wisdom when serving is to avoid the power imbalance, pay attention now, of a one-way care given and its potential mistake. So it should and must be seen as ministry encounter of a mutual relationship exchange, whereby both the people may be equally blessed by the act of caring, meaning both the person providing the care is blessed equally as the person that is receiving the care. So as we look through the scripture, we see the life and ministry of Jesus. It represents the ultimate model of love, compassion, and care for others, particularly those who are marginalized and those who are in need. So throughout the gospel, Jesus consistently reaches out to the sick, to the poor, to the outcasts, and to the oppressed. So the parable of the Good Samaritan actually let us understand, the caring for our neighbors. It reinforces the call to active and loving engagement with those in need, irrespective of their background. Throughout the scriptures, we read about Jesus healing miracles that illuminate holistic approach to care, recognizing physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of human beings. I don't really have time to go through the historical narrative of care in the Bible. But Prof, I've done a lot of, because it's from the early church, Acts 2:44 to 47, where the foundation was laid in the Bible. If you look at the historical social Christian life from the early days of the monastic age, the Middle Age, as it grows down through the century, the Reformations. During the Reformations, we see the like of Martin Luther, John Calvin, how they advocated for systematic approach to social welfare. In the 18th century, we see through the teachings of the time, the emergence of the social gospel movement. The 19th century, the 20th century, as he addressed the faith, we saw the establishment of more structured social services, the collaborations. Many Christian denominations were active in development of welfare programs. We see the 28th century into the 21st century that is more ecumenical and global perspectives of social care in Christianity, emphasizing the need for justice, advocacy, and development. And today, numerous Christian organizations, as they provide contemporary social care services beyond adult social care. Part of that we will see in what my sister is doing. We will see it in the social justice, in the compassion. We will even see it in some of the things like the food bank. The caring system goes on. But the question we must ask is there a place for justice in adult care and theology? Because justice in adult care addresses issues of equity and access to resources. So theological ethics demand that care by administering without discrimination, ensuring equitable treatment for marginalized population, as we have found in the United Kingdom. This principle pushes us as church and caregivers to advocate for social policies similar to what Prof is doing, that promote justice and fairness to everyone, irrespective of race, creed, and color. So in a world where division and discrimination is rife, our drive for this adult care justice and equality must be everyone's job, because we see as equal before God. This must be exemplified by practice of our faith, driven by our belief to counter culture when engaging with adult social care. Finally, let us go for theology of community care in practice. Our faith community must serve as vital source of support in adult social care. So programs that most people, or if you're a church leader that cares for adult social care, meal delivery, companionship, Prof talks about loneliness, visits, support groups, they must emerge from us as a church, because we must start first. We must initiate it. So those models emphasizes the communal aspect of care in fostering relationships and addressing social isolation among adults. And then what about volunteerism? It's something that we do a lot, but we must volunteer more to mobilize our congregations, to offer time and skill that will help for mutual support and fellowship of our adult social care. Advocacy and mental health is still an issue, because we interpret the scripture through the lens of advocacy, so that we faith leaders can influence social policies and educate the congregations on the issue beyond elder care, but also into disability rights and mental health. So as a faith community, as a church, we are positioned to play a significant role in advocating for policies that protect vulnerable adults. We must put a lot of pressure also in our activity on mental health, as soon as it affects the adults. It has gained recognition as a vital aspect of adult care. The church role is in addressing mental health issues, reflect a commitment to holistic care, acknowledging the support in an emotional and spiritual dimension. The narrative of Jesus healing the afflicted serves as a powerful reminder of the church's calling to provide hope and assistance. In conclusion, the theology of adult social care underscores the complex interplay between faith, ethics, and humanity's inherent dignity. Rooted in scriptural teaching and historical practices, the church is called to actively participate in the care of adults within society, recognizing the profound relational aspects of care. As challenges evolve, we too as a church must respond, fostering innovative practices rooted in love, compassion, and justice. In doing so, as faith community, we can reflect the heart of God in our engagement with the most vulnerable among us, proclaiming the transformative power of love in social care. These are not exhaustive, but they illustrate how theology can bring about creative dialogue with the practical and ethical issues raised by adult social care in a way that might inform our practice. Adult social care is one of the major social issues of our time. Make no mistake. Theological engagement is seen as key to ensure that church is able to meaningfully and critically engage with the public, especially in responding to and actively shaping the narrative around care and caring. God bless you.
Reverend Yemi Adedeji. That is for us to know that God is concerned about caring for the adult, caring for the elderly, caring for the vulnerable amongst us. And shortly, I'll be inviting Reverend Umila to join me for a discussion up here at the stage.
Reverend Urmila Kurkalang has had a remarkable journey of faith and service that has led her from humble beginnings in Pune, India, to her current role as a curate at St. Matthew's, ordained as a deacon at St. Paul's Cathedral on July 3, 2021. Reverend Urmila's path has been one shaped by a deep love for Jesus and a commitment to serving others. After moving to the UK in 2004, she spent 20 years as a social worker, where her compassion and faith guided her in making a meaningful impact on people's lives. Her calling to ordained ministry came after years of dedicated service, and she has since embraced this new chapter with joy and devotion. Alongside her children, Samara and Jonas, Reverend Urmila has become a vital part of the St. Matthew's community, where she continues to serve with warmth and purpose. She believes deeply in God's perfect plan and holds firm to the promise from Philippians 1:6 that he who began the good work in us will carry it on to completion. Her faith, compassion, and unwavering dedication to her ministry are a true gift to the church, and we are blessed to walk this journey with her. Please make welcome Reverend Urmila Kurkalang.
Umila is here with a wonderful husband. It's good to have you as well. But let's dive into this discussion, Umila. What inspired you directly into social care?
And I guess that's one of the most important things that I'm here to share is my story. Because we've had some absolutely fascinating input. And you think, well, I could never be like Professor Keith Brown. I'm well beyond 16. Can I start off where Danielle started? And would I ever be called the bridge? But I guess the most important thing for us to remember is that each one of us is unique. What you can do, wherever you are placed, none of us can do. Pastor Tunde cannot step into those spaces, and neither can I. So I come from a place called Pune. It is in India. It is near Mumbai. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church. So mom and dad went to church every Sunday. They spent a lot of time in church, even during the week. But a lot of church community happened within our home, a really small home, where space would have been a challenge. But one of the things that struck me from the time I was really little was mom and dad just didn't go to church and read the Bible and pray. They spent time with people. If someone was going through a difficult situation, they spent time. They shared the little that they had. If someone was sick, they went to hospital to visit them. And I was only really little when I joined them in all of those things. Going to hospital to visit people, going to old age homes, going to orphanages, going even to funerals. And that really, really struck me because I realized that it wasn't just about being able to quote scripture, because they were able to do a lot of that. They taught me the importance of learning scripture. And that is a really, really important starting point for me. But they pointed me to the most important influence in my life, to the person of Jesus. And Jesus really is the reason I got into social care. Jesus knew how to share love, not just by preaching, but by reaching out in practical ways. A lot of you are from a church background, so you will be familiar with the stories in the Bible. Some of us may not be. But Jesus broke bread. He used the smallest and the youngest, like that little boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish, to feed the multitudes. He hung out with the people on the margins. So we've been thinking about the marginalized and the oppressed. We've been thinking about the lonely and the isolated. And that's something that I discovered really young. So there were a couple of turning points. So one was being introduced to the person of Jesus and the fact that Jesus could be the person who walked this journey with me. But I was really young. I was a young teenager when we went to something called a leprosarium, and I didn't even know that there was a word like that. So as a youth group, we went to this leprosarium and we spent the entire day there with them. They were planting things. They had their own garden. They were sowing. They had their own little community. And it was a wonderful community to be part of. They did life together. Now, they had their own separate community away from the rest of society. And the joy and the love that they shared was striking. Now, I could have easily spent the rest of my days there with them and known that there would have been absolute joy. But why were they on the margins? Why did they need to have a separate community, a separate society? And then I remember the time when I was in the hospital, walking the wards, spending time with different people. And the thing that struck me was the need for connection. Each one of us has a need for connection, a need to belong. Each one of us needs the other. And that's when I realized that people, being with people, was what God was calling me to. That was my vocation. To be able to talk, to be able to share stories. And that is why I got into social care.
Wow. Excellent. Now, that's exciting. Now, for many of us, you have a magazine with you, or that must have been handed to you, called Connect. Umila is written a really exciting article there for publication. You can read more about her journey and more about what she said. Now, you talk about being involved in social care, not just being about quoting of scriptures or knowing the scriptures, but about being with people. Now, how has that been impacted with the pandemic, taking people away from people? And we see a lot of, even in the professional world today, people want to work from home, people are working from home. Companies are finding it so difficult to get their people back into the office. Churches are getting it difficult to get people back into church. How do we navigate around that case of being there for people? How do we do that?
I think that's the question we're trying to crack or answer since the pandemic, isn't it? What is it that gives us life? What is it that inspires us? What are those spaces in which you, the people around you, would engage with other people? So it's really finding that place of connection. I'm going to be at my church tomorrow, Professor, and so I won't be able to be here. But it is the role of church. So, of course, getting into the pandemic affected us as well. Absolutely. Children, young people, older people. So, yes, you have to be practical because you have to think about the vulnerable in your midst. We met in people's gardens. We stood at people's doorsteps, where it meant, in terms of the shopping, it meant in terms of the conversations. It was working out where people were at. Now, the young people in our community didn't want to meet on Zoom. And you think the young people would want to engage with technology, but that's not where they engaged. Now, post-pandemic, we have a lot of young people coming to our youth group alternate Fridays. We have about 35 on any given Friday. Very few of them are Christian. Now, what they come for there is a space to be and a space to belong. We eat together. We get them to engage in, sometimes they just want to sit and play Jenga or sit and color. But sometimes they step up to join in with an activity called the Young Apprentice. What is it that gives people meaning? What is it that brought you out the door after the pandemic? All of us need help and support in practical ways, but all of us need a place for connection. And I wonder what it is that has brought you here today. Like Danielle, some of us may want to just be able to make a difference. We know that if we're isolated, that it affects our own mental health. That's something that we discovered during the pandemic. Well, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert would certainly have an impact on that. My daughter didn't mind being at home. My daughter didn't mind doing homeschooling. She thrived. She flourished. Now, when it came to her birthday that year, she is an only child. She was born premature, and I'm sure my husband's going to tell her that I have mentioned that here today. We bring people together for her birthday. And during the pandemic, when we were allowed to gather in small groups, we did that in shifts. So over a Saturday and a Sunday, we had 4 and 5 shifts of 2 hours each. We would welcome people into the garden. We'd eat together. We'd spend time. And then we'd sanitize all of the surfaces, and the next batch would come in. And she enjoyed that as well. So people enjoy doing things like this in small doses. You really have to work out what it is that gets people.
Good. What it is that gets people or get you to people. Now, you have since stepped out of social care into the pulpit. And then you can see that she has her collar on. Now, what will have kept you in social care today? I know you say the calling, you need to go into the calling of the ministry, which is fantastic. But is there anything so strong that will have kept you still in active social care profession?
And I think I'd want to go back to some of those questions that Professor Keith was asking us earlier. So who is meant to care for the isolated and the marginalized and the oppressed? Is it the state? Is it the church? And the only answer really is to be able to do it together. Now, Professor Keith said he didn't start off, so 1972, when you first gave your life to Jesus. At that point, he wouldn't have been able to necessarily stand up here and give us all that he did. But he's an expert in the field. He could also be an expert physicist. Now, we need experts in all of these fields. Now, in social care taught me a lot about assessments, about support plans, about safeguarding, about best interests. It taught me about criteria that you need to meet to be able to receive particular services. And you're right, it comes down to vocation. It is because of my faith that I got into social care. It is because of the person of Jesus that I got into social care. But when you get to that point, when you just feel a little bit restless in that vocation, when Jesus met with people, when Jesus met people's needs, there was no criteria. There were no restrictions. There wasn't about high or medium or low level social care. And it wasn't about every individual you met and set up a support plan for. what God was calling me to, out of, and in some ways I may have left the council, I may have left the profession of social care, but I think social care is part of what I do more so now than ever. The pulpit is just one of those places that you inhabit as a priest. Now, for those of you who are part of the church, what the Bible talks about is a priesthood of all believers. You don't need to have a color to be part of what God wants to do in the field of social care. So I think God was calling me to something wider. Safeguarding comes from the heart of God. It is God's heart and God's desire to protect everyone. And as we were thinking about isolation, as we were thinking of diagnoses, as we were thinking of illness, the thing that God was calling me to work towards is this image that is in the last book of the Bible. It is from the book of Revelation, where God says there will be no more schizophrenia, no more cancer, no more AIDS, no more death, no more sickness, no more isolation, but a place where we will be able to live together in unity without all of that. Where we will be together in joy. And it is that God promises a new heaven and a new earth, where the challenges that we're experiencing in the here and now won't be present. How do we get there? It isn't just by thinking about how do I pay the bills? Now, social care, all that the state has to offer, food banks, all that we can do as church community, whether on a Sunday morning or whether when we meet on a Thursday for cafe at St. Matthew's, it is so much more than that. Because that place, in that new heaven and that new earth, is the place where we want all of Hillingdon, all of Uxbridge,
Amen.
All of the world.
Amen. Amen. My final question to you, Mila, is a follow-up to the question Andy asked earlier on. You have seen the best of the two worlds, working social care professionally. Now you are a reverend in the Anglican Church, priesthood. What space does the church has to plug in the gap of what we can do in the area of social care, either as individual church or collective church? Is there a place like that? I'm saying this, and the deputy mayor is already gone. We all belong to this borough, and we in the same community. Is there a place to plug this gap? What's your take on that?
Sure. It's been fascinating because it was 6 years ago that I stopped working at Hillingdon Council, and I have certainly spent a lot of time talking to Councillor Philip Cawthorne about adult social care. Now, I know in terms of resources how stretched resources are for the state. And we've heard from Professor Keith Brown how churches can come together and make a whole world of difference. Now, it's small scale for where we're at. But church at St. Matthew's, and I imagine that is pretty much the way it is here, is open every single day of the week. Correct. We have Food Bank and Doorway, which is a walk-in information and advice service that is open every Monday and every Friday. We have 2 AA groups that meet in our church building. We run a toddler group. We run a community cafe for anyone who wants to walk in off the streets. We run a youth group. We also have space for older people to come along, to gather, to socialize, so that they don't have to be on the phone to those criminals as the only lifeline. We need to learn how to be community. Now, one of the things that has stuck with me for a little while is, who is the other? We see people in our churches every week, every Sunday. And the challenge for me is we see a certain section of the people of Useley and West Drayton in our building from Monday through to Sunday. But who is it that we don't see? I think that is the question. Who is it that we don't see? Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've had some really exciting things with the community that have opened up. In the next week, I'm doing a funeral for someone in Hatton Grove. It is residential accommodation for people with severe learning disabilities. I've met with the care home manager, and we're thinking through ways of how we can do community together. One of the other things I realized is that there are people in our community who go to the pub down the road, and I don't know the people in that pub. So the last couple of meetings that I had in that pub. One was a meeting with an 84-year-old to think about her place in the community, her place in church. And then the other one was with our youth worker, with our church administrator. And I happened to meet the new manager of that pub. And I said, Tim, I would love to be able to do something together, because the people of Useley and West Drayton are our community. And he turned around to me and he said, pubs and churches are where community happens. So it's great to be able to welcome people into the building, and it's great to have all of you here today. But you're going to be able to reach out to someone that we want. Now, what does it mean to be church? It's way wider than what happens within our church buildings. How will you and I be church when we're stood in the queue at the supermarket till? How will you and I be church when we're at the bus stop? How will you and I be church in our offices, in our schools? And like Canon told us, the greatest thing that Jesus said is love your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Not when you're sat in church, but who is your neighbor when you're out in the community? That is the role of the church, to go out there, not just to bring people through the doors.
Wonderful. Let's appreciate Umila. Thank you very much, Umila. And I'm sure that we'll have many more questions that will come to you over the rest of this day. Let's take a few more questions. If you have any more questions that we can, how many of us have questions that we can take?
Good afternoon. My question is to Professor Keith.
Yep.
Thank God I've been to Mokombo, somewhere in Cumbria. And good. And I enjoyed the river there, or the water. So that was good. But going to my question, and I've been to social care as well. So not just Mokombo, but I've been to social care as well. So, and my journey in social care is such that I'm qualified as a nurse and as a midwife. But my question goes this: how are you going to help us between the people that are qualified and getting work? There is a big gap. I'm qualified today as a nurse and as a midwife. I'm interested in working. I have no work. So it's a big problem. And you mentioned something about trying to connect the private and NHS, but then the private dropped out somewhere along the line. I think I heard something like that. It is a big problem. Thank God for the church. I think I must say a big thank you to the church. The church has been very helpful. The NHS, in terms of NHS, I think it's the union that has been helpful as well. You know, the union like Royal College of Nurses and Midwives and things like that, they've been helpful as well. In terms of the community has been helpful in terms of the job center. The job center has been there, you know, to bridge that gap. But they've tried, they've done a lot, but there's still more. So my question is, how? Okay,
if the question is, then that's fine. Keith will answer that question based on a general perspective. If it is driven towards a specific line of inquiry, I think that will be better dealt with on a direct note. So, but on a general perspective, to get a job for those who are qualified, who are certificated to work, I think it will be quite easy to say that if you go to the right place, you get a job. But I guess Keith will add some more to that. Yeah, but on a specific note to the question being asked, I think that will be addressed on a one-to-one basis. So if you want to be made to speak with him later, I can do that. Yeah, let's take this second question.
My question is to Daniel. Thank you so much for your speech earlier. I just wanted to ask, so considering the growing challenges in adult social services, particularly with loneliness and staffing shortages, do you believe it is more effective to open care homes for the elderly or provide in-home care services to support them in their own homes? What are the key advantages and disadvantages of these approaches?
It's all about allowing them to have their own choice, really. Some people find it better to stay at home. Some people have supportive families that will pop in throughout the day and weekends, but you have some that just don't have that sort of support and care from family and friends. So on the other hand, that's the feedback then we will give to the professionals such as social workers and GPs on what we find when we go into the homes. And when I was caring home to home, I found that I was the only person going in for 5 minutes 3 times a day. You know, otherwise they wouldn't see anybody else. I found myself spending longer there than 5 minutes, which would then, you know, wasn't being paid for it, but I just couldn't leave. You know, so then I would feed back to my manager, feed back to the teams, and then someone else would go back and take that off my hands and go in and do an assessment to see whether it's beneficial for those people to move into a care home. Care homes are a great way for people to widen their social network and attend to activities and, you know, have conversation. But it all goes down to, you know, their own choice, really. But it's encouraging those family and friends to go and visit those loved ones within their home because, you know, I don't think they understand how lonely some people can get. So if they haven't got the time to go and see them, maybe it's for the families and friends to discuss about their loved ones moving into residential and care homes, just to make them have a better quality of life and, you know, see more people during the day.
25 years ago, that was a question that the state was asking a lot, particularly under the free market, you look after yourself type scenario. Why is the family not doing more? 20 years ago, the very elderly were predominantly women. Why? Because the men got slaughtered in 1916 on the Battle of the Somme. And they were a generation that never got remarried. And they were a generation that never had a family. So we had an awful lot of tosh being talked about, didn't we? When you've got very old ladies who've never been married since their fiancé, loved one or husband got mowed down by a German machine gun, and they remain single. So that could be an issue. 2, as you mentioned, families and choice. What about the impact of divorce? How many men in their 30s, 40s and 50s shrewdly decide the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, leave their wives and their kids, and 30 years later end up being on their own single? Are their families and their children now going to care for them, given they've done a runner? We don't talk about that very much. The impact of divorce in society, or people that weren't even married that split up, is massive. And we don't look enough at the economics and the structures and the systems around that, do we? And thirdly, absolutely right, Daniel, it's about choice. Who's going to pay? Because if the state isn't going to pay, and you haven't got a lot of money, you have no choice. Choice is an illusion. Yeah? So it's a lot of tosh again, talking about talking about choice when there is no choice. Does that make sense? Yeah? Choice is something about that people have when they're wealthy, with opportunity. Unless society is prepared to fund those residential places or the daycare, there ain't choice. That was the point I was trying to make. Are you with me? So we just have to be a bit more grown up. It was a problem because of the First World War. It was a problem because of divorce. It is a problem if there's not enough money. And it's really interesting when you do European comparisons, right? This is fascinating. If you look at Northern Europe, France across to Germany, they are roughly 15 to 20 years behind the demographic time bomb. Demography is the study of how many young people, how many middle-aged people, how many old people do you have in your society, and you grow a graph. Yeah? We forget in this country that in 1939, 1940, 1941, when the Germans brought bombers over, they were very small, with very small numbers of bombs. By 1943, we were going over that way with 1,000 bombers at a time, with 10 tons of bombs on, and we blew up half of Europe. And so demographically, they are a lot younger than us because we killed them all. And nobody talks about the social policy issues of that, do they? They keep saying, oh, it's better over here, it's better in Europe. Well, of course, they're not dealing with the old population that we've got because of a freak of wars. We don't like to talk about those things because wars are not nice things to talk about, but there's some truths. Yeah? Do you know China has invested so much in technology? They spent more in technological development. It's actually the same amount of money that we in America spent fighting a war in Iraq, fighting a war in Afghanistan. There's been the same amount of money that has been invested by China in its development of its technology. And that's why it's years ahead of us in our technology. Yes? You know why your 5G phones don't work very well and you keep tapping them like that? It's because the government's decided we can't use Huawei technology because it's Chinese and there's sensitivities around it. But the problem is they're the only people that know how to make the technology. And we are so arrogant in this country, we think we are the world leaders because we're British. And we think that we are ahead of everybody else, and we have forgotten we are miles behind. And we're having to catch up. And we need to wake up. Sorry, that's a sermon. That's next year's lecture.
I would like to ask Prof this question. What caused the disintegration of faith and healthcare in this country? Because now you can't go into the hospital to pray for someone. And because I work in healthcare, I've been in healthcare for about 5 years. And you see, some people, I will be honest, and if we are being honest, their condition is not medicinal, if we've been honest. Because all this medication we pop into them is not doing anything. So how can faith be reintegrated into the healthcare system? Because this country is a faith-based country, but the faith part has been, eroded.
Ripped off.
So what can be done to, reintegrate faith into healthcare in this country?
I think Keith has got a lot to say about this. Let's make him welcome. And then we'll come to Karon Yemi.
This is probably a lecture in 2 years' time. There's a myth that you can't pray with people in the NHS. You can. End of. I do. I think we've got to be careful about how we live our faith and display our faith. I was talking to colleagues earlier on. I am the only Christian professor of social work in the country. What is that about, folks, by the way? I thought if we're all about what we believe today, we should be encouraging our young people to become social workers. Correct. Actually, it strikes me that in most churches, we're trying to persuade people to become bankers and lawyers and doctors because they make more money. We need to get our act together a bit more, don't we? Yes. But as a professor, a social worker and a government advisor, can you imagine the difficult issues I had to deal with? And the sensitivities. And so I wanted to be asked for my advice because I was known as the leading expert, not as a Christian expert. Does that make sense? My expertise came before my faith. That's not to say my faith was divorced from my expertise, but I wanted to be known as somebody who was credible. Yeah? I wanted to sit down with a government minister or a home secretary, and I used to regularly do this, and have private briefings with them or with the Queen. I'll tell you a story about it in a minute. And actually be asked because they were interested in knowing what I had to say. And then what's fascinating is when you start having that discussion, people often say to me, what makes you do it, Keith? How do you deal with all these difficult things? How do you remain sane in this insane world? And that's when you can say, well, I know somebody. And sometimes as Christians, we're so tactically stupid, we get it wrong and people react. Be diligent, be faithful in your work, and you can then start integrating the faith into that work. There's the wisdom. I laugh on this one. You know, a few years ago, the Queen, before she died, she had a system where she used to invite people every so often to come along, so she'd have a private audience to find out about subject. And a number of years ago, she invited me to Buckingham Palace to talk to her about older people and care of older people. And she invited my wife as well. My wife made me laugh so much. She deliberately went down Portswood High Street in Southampton, went to the charity shops and bought her whole outfit from charity shops to go to visit the Queen in Buckingham Palace on principle. She wanted a whole outfit for 10 quid. Wow. And I loved the day when I got the train up to Waterloo, and I got into Waterloo, the railway station, and got in a taxi, and I said to the taxi driver, "Buckingham Palace, please." He looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "Buckingham Palace, there's the pass." Drove in, gates open, in the get there. The Queen was asking me questions because I was an expert. But that was my opportunity to talk about my faith. We need to start being sensible and upfront and clear about what we are, rather than trying to be a Christian. People say to me, "I want a Christian doctor, I want a Christian teacher." No, you don't. You want a good teacher and a good doctor. And what you hope is that the good teacher or the good doctor or the good also has faith. What you don't want is a Christian one that's useless. And unfortunately, there are quite a few of those. Yes.
Well, we got the lecture for 2 years' time this year. Isn't that exciting? And that is for us to take note of. That's for us to take note of. It's good for us to share the fact that the skill is needed. The faith is there. And I guess you will learn a lot from that, because as a nurse, as a doctor, everybody will listen to you if you show them the fact that you are good. The integrity is there. Everybody will listen to you. Amen. Another question? Yes. More questions? Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Keats and every other facilitators. It's been very great to have this level of enlightenment. I just want to ask a question regarding the steps being taken now to bridge the gap in terms of the workforce in the social care services, and also the provision of service to the elderly ones that need them. Thank you.
In terms of professional
empowerment, encouragement, motivation to join the social skills services to bridge the gap.
Okay, who's gonna take that? Yeah. Okay, Umila.
I realize, and that's why we're missing Jan here, because I can tell you from some of my time in social care, but that's from over 6 years ago. One of the things that councils and social care services do is link up with universities, and in terms of offer placements. Now, my husband used to be a teacher by trade. Both of us are from India. When he came over here, that's when he trained in social work. And the council supported that. The council is supporting that for lots of people who want to get into the care industry. So some people who get into social care don't get in as qualified social workers. A lot of them will start off as care assistants, healthcare assistants, someone who's done an NBQ, someone who's there just to be able to make a difference. So what councils can do, linked up with universities, is a lot of that not happening. I've just come back from a conference yesterday with some of my clergy colleagues, and a lot of you in Uxbridge will know Andy. We were at this conference together. I don't know how much of it is happening, and that's why it would be great to have that conversation with social care. But I was talking to someone whose wife is part of a step-up program in Hammersmith and Fulham Council. I know that there are conversations going on with the principal social worker in Hounslow, and I know that because my husband's there, to be able to get people into the step-up program. Now, when I came as a social worker 20 years ago and I came from India, I did not want to be in the UK. But the UK was looking for social workers, and they looked far and wide. So I think it's kind of matching up a crude word in terms of like a recruitment drive. But where is the need? Where is the gap? But then it goes back to the state in terms of resources, because it's the human resource that costs the most money.
Okay, so I think that was kind of right up until about 7 years ago.
Yep.
You cannot now train as a social worker or a nurse and be funded by the state unless you're doing a postgraduate step-up program. So what you're looking at is 3 years at university with £9,500 fee per year and fund yourself with £50,000 debt to come out and earn 30 grand a year. That is the state of play today, okay? Now, whether the government does something about that, we'll see. But the previous government was not interested. Took away all the bursaries for nursing education in 2015. Okay, so we are in a complete workforce planning nightmare. Now, the answer to this, how are we going to deal with it? Well, for me, the problem is young people 10 years ago all wanted to be celebrities. And now they all want to be internet influencers. And we've got a whole range of stuff going on, and it's like, it's work of nothingness. Yeah? We have to start valuing what some of these people do. It's no good clapping for them and then stopping them. It's right. The job is very rewarding, but it's also hard. And it's shift work, and it's difficult work.
365 days a year, 24 hours.
And it never stops. And so we have to start saying that actually we value people in our society. We value them as individuals, as groups, and we want to encourage them more. And we need to stop this kind of notion that it's actually all about being an internet influencer. What on earth does that mean? Yeah? Or desire to be a media. Everyone wants to do media studies. There are more people studying media studies than work in the media every year of the year. Yeah? We have as a society, as human beings, to ask some difficult questions. The questions, the answers here are right, but I'm just giving you the bigger scale of it. Does that make sense? There are huge, huge issues that we have not dealt with as a society for years. Society has ignored these problems, and we are waking up, and the current government is waking up to a nightmare. Now, what it does, I don't know, but hopefully there are Christian voices able to influence the next generation of politicians. And I've already hinted, I can't tell you too much because it's confidential, but you know, I'm having regular conversations with Wes Streeting. He's come to me and said, what do we do, Keith? And there are others, and we have to keep doing that, don't we? I'm sorry guys, if you really pray about that. Yeah? The most confidential thing I'm dealing with at the moment is to try and make sure we don't have assisted suicide by the end of the year. And a tablet to say goodbye to people. And the Mental Capacity Act, I've been asked on that because that's my main area of expertise. And it's all highly confidential, so I shouldn't even tell you this much. But that is what is literally going on. That's what's on my plate today. How do I make sure we don't end up in a society that devalues people so much that they eventually get the point and say, take a tablet and go. Yeah? I think we might win it. I'm confident about it, but boy, that's what keeps me up at night from sleeping. And I sometimes think, how on earth, God, did you take a working class boy from Manchester, growing up in poverty, out of Hong Kong to that position? And you know what I end up thinking? How great is my God?
Hallelujah.
How great. And God is the same God for you. And if you know, I was taught this as a young person. 1 plus God is a majority. You know, and I just want to go with that sometimes and say, I simply want to be faithful. And I want my God to walk with me and to walk with you and in your sphere of life. Be bolder, be braver. Stand up.
Well, it's excellent meat to chew, isn't it? Yes. So, how many people has been inspired today to want to do something about social care? That you want to go into as a profession? Maybe you want to, like Danielle, want to start your own care home. You want to take another degree to qualify in it. You've been inspired in one way or the other. I mean, this industry, we learned, is 55 billion pounds worth, if not more. And yet is not enough. We needed more. We need more resources. Now, who is going to care for those resources? Danielle said at New Horizon, it was just one. How many years ago? 11 years ago. They now have 8. That means there's a growing trend of it.
So we can start it from, teaching younger years to stop, the mental health and the crisis as they get older. Try and teach them so they can actually stay with us. If they stay with us throughout their whole lives, if they cannot remain independent, it's consistency. It's about consistency.
Excellent. There are many reasons why some of us are listening to these. And I tell you, one of the reasons why I'm involved in this. I'll be 57 next year. I'm still very young, but I'm getting old. Isn't it? The same you are. What we're saying is, who is going to look after you? Who is going to look after you and who's going to pay for it? These are the questions that Keith is getting us to think about. Because there are many more problems that are there that we're nobody's talking about it, that got us to where we are. And until we dive to look at the answers to those questions, that means we're not moving an inch. As church, what can we do? What can you do? What can I do? I'm going to ask for probably final note of commentary or comments from our speakers. And I'm going to do that, hoping that as they summarily, maybe a sentence or two to just share with us. I want to also say that, like we did, can I have one of the summary from last year? The publication we made from last year. We have it downstairs. We got one here. We got one here. Okay. This is a copy of the lecture last year. And we're hoping to do that. And I might as well just ask in the front of everybody. What we'll pray for or ask and humbly ask for, if I may say, is to ask that our speakers will please make available their notes to us. We want to be able to produce a copy of this for this year and make it available for people who would like to take later on. We'll send a copy to you. If you're registered for this lecture today, either before today or you registered when you came in today, we will make sure that you get a copy of this. We'll make sure you get a copy of this, at least the electronic copy of this, once we have binded it together and put it in one location. We want to have this from the legacy of last year. We want to make that available again. Perhaps, and when we did it, we put one at the library. We put a few copies at the library. We put a few copies. The Brunel, the community department in Brunel actually came and took some copies for their departments as well. So we're going to do this, and we'll be able to share this with as many people as possible who will find the sense to get something done out of this. So please, we'll be doing that. But what I want to say is that we'll just ask for a final comment from all of our speakers before we begin to draw the curtain on today's session. Can we have the microphone, please? The second microphone. Should we take it from just let's have Danielle.
I'd just like to end the session, and I'd like to thank everyone for being here today, but I'd like to end it with no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. So, just to be kind.
Be kind.
And thoughtful.
Be kind. Benevolence. Excellent. Yeah. Umila?
I think I'm going to go back to one of the things that stirred me up. And with everything Pastor Tunde has been trying to challenge and instigate for us. So this is something that was said by the founder of World Vision, someone called Bob Pierce. He said, "Let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God." And all of the things that we've been talking about here today, those challenges in government, those challenges where it comes to funding, the challenges of the individual, and whatever we experience as mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, anything that is on our heart, if we pray like that, if we act like that, let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. I think for me, there are two areas. The benevolence aspect of it is rooted in love. The care, the love, the ministry that we care for the elderly, just like they are receiving the care for us from the aspect of ministry, is fundamental, is key, because that's part of our service. That's part of our commitment. That's part of what God has called us to do. Whichever we are, either you're a professional, either you are serving in church. And the other part is the professional. Now, for those who are in this profession, listen to Professor Keith. He stirs you up. He provokes you. He inspires you. You think your mind is going this way, he brings your mind the other way, which means there are a lot of things that needs to be unpacked. And there are a lot of things that we need to rediscover. And so it means we have to dig deep more to make a difference in a world that is getting bigger than we are, so that our profession can match our benevolence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll give the final say to Professor Keith.
What a pleasure for me to come here today. Thank you. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't follow my. Listen to your own heart. Find out what your inspiration is. Find out what your calling is. And live that to the full. And at the end of your day, you'll be able to look back and say, job well done.
Thank you. Just two things for me to announce before we finish up. You will have been given a feedback form to fill. Please do fill it for us. We will value so much your feedback and your comments. And especially, we're already talking about next year, what we should look at for next year. I think Keith made mention of a few of what our thought is. We've been looking at the area of AI and the impact of that for us on so many grounds. And please do feel for us and suggest. Please suggest what you might think. We have artificial intelligence, a threat or a revolution. That is one thing that we're considering. We've talked about migration one way or the other today, and then the tragedy of global migration and cultural intelligence and family security. Talking about different things. So all this has to do with the area and what church as a people in the community should also be involved in. Leadership is also a subject. Leadership scarcity, a disruptive mindset that we all need to look at. All these are things that we are considering. So we want to hear from you if there is any idea of what you think we should be focusing on for next year. And if you have other ideas that is outside of these three, please do suggest to us. We'll be very glad to listen out to what you're thinking. Please, afterwards, we would like to take some pictures with all our guest speakers. Before you go, we would like you to please do us the honors to do that before we go. We'll take the speakers and then the pastors and the speakers, and then we'll also take one with all the volunteers, all those who have given themselves. And I really want to appreciate all those who make themselves available, volunteering to ensure that all this, there are people who were here earlier on in the week and then during the week and who came in from work. They came in straight from work to come and join hands. Yesterday they were here to arrange and set up all this place. And we're also going to still be transforming this whole place for church. Back tomorrow, I would like to say thank you to all of you. God bless you in a way that nobody can. I can bless you as much as God will look down your way and bless you mightily. God will honor you in the same way that you have honored myself and Toyin, and also honored the leadership of the house to get this done. God bless you indeed. Amen. So we'll take a picture with as many people as possible who would like to join us. But I really want to thank you so much for making this possible for us to gather like this under one roof to talk about the subject of social care.